Hi everyone, welcome to the Property Pays podcast. This is the first podcast we're doing, and today I'm with my friend and colleague Carl from Shortmove. He looks after all my properties in Coventry, as well as a number of properties over the UK, including Southampton, Reading, Doncaster, London, Portsmouth.
Yeah, Slough, Birmingham, Liverpool, kind of you name it, really.
The list goes on and on. So, yeah, this is the first podcast we're doing today. We're going to talk about an introduction to rent to serviced accommodation, exactly what rent to rent is, and just have a bit of an informal chat. We'll talk a little bit about what Shortmove does, how long it's been established, a little bit about my journey, and some of the things I'm looking to do going forward in terms of mentoring people and expanding my portfolio. So, yeah, should we start with exactly what is rent to rent?
Yeah, okay, let's talk about that. So, I come at rent to rent from a specific standpoint in that we specialise just in service accommodation. But the theory behind rent to rent is you find a landlord that's distressed, or they're fed up, or they have other reasons for not wanting to manage their property their own anymore and maximise their revenue. You offer them a guaranteed rent for a set period, and then you rent it out at a higher rate using different sort of models. It could be as an HMO, it could still be as an AST potentially, or a single let, or as we do, service accommodation. And it's all down to finding a place that's to rent at the right price, and you're able to rent it out at a higher and make the difference as profit.
Yeah, so if you're doing the rent to SA model, I think one of the things we always say, and it's a good rule of thumb, is that you want low monthly rent but high nightly rate.
Yeah, effectively, yeah, because that's your margin, that's your profit.
Yeah, so in terms of SA, one of the reasons I actually got into SA as opposed to rent to HMO was the legislation behind everything. Not that I'm lazy, but I didn't really want to get involved with getting an HMO license, or the regulations, room sizes, fire exits, fire doors, emergency lighting. Whereas when it comes to a rent to SA, at the moment, there's not a lot of...
No, I mean, we do, especially if we try and take on a former HMO, we do try and maintain the regulations.
Yeah.
In fact, some of the properties that are yours are regulated as HMOs, but they don't have to be licensed. So you've still got fire doors, emergency lighting, etc. But you're right, within service accommodation, we do what we can to make sure the guests are as safe as possible, but the regulation isn't there yet in terms, like you said, as room sizes. The reason being, it's not a person's permanent domestic dwelling.
Yeah,
They might be there for a couple of nights, they might be there anything up to 6 months. I think you're right, though, it will come. Regulation will eventually be brought in, as it should be. In fact, I think our entire industry should be far more heavily regulated than it is.
I think it's going to be in the next few months to year or so. I think they're just not going to let people that don't own properties make as much money out of them as we do at the moment.
Yeah, there's going to be the restrictions will be interesting to see what they actually look like. They've brought in the restrictions in London, the 90-day rule, which effectively means that if you've got one property, you can't let it out. It's a bit more complicated than this, but effectively for a quarter of the year. The idea being is to stop people doing what we do, because the argument is it takes much needed domestic properties out of the market.
Right.
The counter argument to that is there's plenty of rent to rent opportunities in London, which means that they're empty because they're not being rented in the domestic market.
Yeah.
So logically, why wouldn't you fulfill it with SA? It's a bit chicken and egg, I suppose.
Is the ways to get around the 90-day rule without being illegal?
No, not without skirting close to regulations. But people do, and people make a lot of money out of it. But the fines are so. How did you say?
Yeah, loads of people are doing it. So how are they making money and getting around the law?
It's a bit tricky, but ultimately, what people do is there's an option, weirdly, on Airbnb where you can hide the availability of your property. So if someone's searching between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., they won't find it. And what a lot of people do is they use that tool so that people that work in an office that are trying to clamp down on service accommodation, like local borough councils, they're only going to be searching between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So they won't find your property. That's one of the ways that people do it. Another way is they just list it and hope. If they get fined, and they deal with the fine. Another one is to create 4 independent listings for your property and list it available 3 months each throughout the year. It's just something that we've been offered properties within the 90-day, but we don't operate in the 90-day restriction zone just because A, we don't need to, and B, that's not how I want our company Shortmove to operate. I don't want us to be having to think creatively to avoid rules and regulations. I'd rather abide by them and be profitable that way instead.
So would you take on a property in London to manage?
Right now, no. If regulations changed, or actually I say no, if the deal works so that we can stay within the 90-day rule and still make someone money. So let's say a homeowner lives abroad 3 months of the year and they want to maximise their revenue, then absolutely, we would take it on because the market in London is broadly similar to everywhere else. But I wouldn't take one on purely as a service accommodation unit for 12 months of the year because the money just wouldn't be there without us breaking rules.
Okay. And then in terms of Shortmove, I know I just briefly explained about where the properties are, but talk to us about sort of how long that's been established, what exactly it does, and what your views are with maybe what you're doing me as well going forward.
Okay, yeah. So Shortmove was set up, I think, just coming up 3 years ago now by a couple of estate agents in the northeast who wanted to branch out from being a letting agent to also operating single short stays. They did very, very well. They got particularly large, particularly quickly. But for various reasons, it didn't fit in with what they wanted to continue doing. They wanted to protect and invest in the letting agency because they deemed that to be a more profitable long-term venture. It was then bought by a property developer in the northeast who I think saw it more as a strategy, yet another property strategy. But it's just not. That's not how it works. It's a 24/7, 365 customer service business. So he decided to sell. I was at the point of looking to get into service accommodation with my own units, but when a management company came up that I knew I could scale fairly easily with my previous business experience, it made more sense to just take that on.
Yeah.
And that was 2 years ago in May. So we're about 19, 20 months. When we took it on, it had gone from 64, 65 units to 18 units because that's the difference between having someone running it as a business versus having someone run it as a strategy. And we're now back up to the 50 odd, something like that. We've been higher, but COVID has had an effect on some landlords being nervous and deciding to take a step back and wait and see how the market changes. But we're still growing. And then with regards to your units in Coventry, we've got a good spread from single studio units right the way up to 5-bed, almost all ensuite houses, and then a varying balance in between. What we're seeing in Coventry in particular, we're pretty much full across the whole portfolio, give or take. But some of the other cities like Birmingham, we're really, really struggling.
Yeah.
And we are noticing that a lot of the smaller provincial towns at the minute, cities, are doing much better than the big ones. So Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester are really struggling, relatively speaking, compared to what they were doing. And then as for what we plan to do, well, we've seen a lot of companies doing what we do fall by the wayside in the last probably 9 or 10 months. Some of the bigger units, bigger companies, should I say, with 80 to 100, 120 units have all collapsed.
Yeah.
Whereas we've kept our growth rate sensible, we've kept our portfolio sensible, and we are organically growing at the rate that I'd like. And the plan is for us to build a very good sized but easy to manage portfolio of properties. And then if we reach a point where we need to scale and bring in more people, then we will. I mean, we're a fairly small team at the minute, but we systemize a lot of things and we've outsourced stuff that other people are better at than we are. So our rate management, for example, we've brought a team in that manages that for us. Our inbound calls, we've got a team that manages that for us, and they're independent but work for us. And then also one of the reasons that you and I are doing what we do is that I personally, in the last few months, more so than ever, have seen more and more people teach rent to service accommodation as this amazing get rich quick sort of scheme without highlighting, yes, there is profitability in it, but there's also a downside to what we do. And it's a lot harder than you think, and it's not a quick fix. I mean, I was talking to you earlier, I won't say specifics, but there's a couple of people who started to operate in a city that we operate in who spent, must be £7,500, £8,000 on a 2-bed flat. to furnish it. It looks spectacular. It looks really good. And they're expecting, let's say, 120, 130 pound a night in a market, and they need that, but in a market that's only operating at 70, 80 pounds a night.
It's just unrealistic, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But they've been taught that that's the thing to do. Now, yes, it was 3 years ago when the market was buoyant and everyone was doing well at what we're doing. Making your place stand out like that is definitely, it's still the right thing to do, but there are other ways of doing it. Or what we do is we just make sure that we've got the properties that the demand requires. There's no point in spending, I don't know, £1,000 per bedroom on a place that contractors are going to stay in, because they'll just, ruin things through use.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly how I feel. In terms of the mentorship side and in training people in getting involved in this, I think a lot of people that are doing it at the moment are just giving unrealistic expectations to people. A lot of people are saying, well, if you take on this flat, you'll make £1,000 a month. And
yeah, it's a very common figure, that is, £1,000 a month.
I mean, that is just unrealistic as well. I mean, it's possible, but it's more than likely you're going to be making £500-600 a month.
It totally depends. So from a studio in a city where the market is pretty buoyant, you'll make £300-400 a month. In a 2-bed flat, which seems to be the one that everyone goes for, realistically at the minute, 400 to 500 is kind of higher end of what you'll get across the UK.
Yeah.
There are cities operating and doing a lot better than that. And then as you get to some of the bigger houses, we've just taken on a 6-bedroom house in Reading, and already we've got a 21-night booking for £2,500.
Yeah.
Now, that's only £100 and something a night, but the rental on the place is £1,400, and the bills take it up to about £1,700. So already in 3 weeks, we've made more than the profit that is required for that investor to be happy, and we've still got almost 10 days to go.
Yeah.
So it is possible, and it depends on the size. But don't forget that investor has put quite a lot of time, effort, and money, and exposed themselves to a large outlay every month to get those kind of returns.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, on that subject, when we run our numbers for potential investors, if the deal looks like it'll return their money that they've put in back within a year, it's probably quite a good deal. So let's say it costs them $7,000 all in for everything. If they paid a saucer, for furniture, for all of the initial fees up front, solicitors' fees and so on, if you can get them that back over a year period, you do, at the minute in particular, you're doing very well.
Yeah. No, I get that completely. And you mentioned as well that you said about if you're looking at the figures. So exactly what does Shortmove get involved in the process of doing?
So we tend not to source properties. But generally speaking, we will help people. So as an example, there's a guy that every so often will message me saying, I've just found this property. He tends to specialise in Slough because he lives down there. He'll send me over a photo or a Rightmove link or a Gumtree link, a detailed outline of the property itself. I'll then go and do my research. It'll take me 2 or 3 hours to do proper. I can do some cursory research really quickly, but the in-depth research of what the nightly rates are likely to be over a 3-year period, not just now, and to achieve what level of occupancy. Run it through our calculator, and then that will give me an expected, not guaranteed, but an expected monthly return. And then if that's a monthly return that gives them the money back in 12 months, it's something I'd say, yes, let's investigate it further. But we can do everything. So from that point on, if this guy were to say to me, right, I want to take it on, what do I need to do? I could theoretically just say, sit back. We'll get it furnished. We'll sort out the furniture finance if that's the route you want to go. We can help you with contracts if you need it. We'll source the first guest. We'll get the photo, absolutely everything. So from the moment he's found it and signed the contracts, he doesn't need to do anything.
Yeah.
And that's the longer term goal. We've also got people where we haven't taken a property on with them yet, a lady in Nottingham, but she wants some help and some guidance. So we've organised a percentage split. So I'm not going to charge her the full management fee because I'm not doing full management. But she needs a little bit of help, support, guidance and reassurance. So we'll just take it, and it's only a few percent, it's not a lot, each month just to be there and help her if she needs it. And I think that's going live beginning of March. So we can offer any sort of package that anybody wants, really.
And what was your background before Shortmove? What put you in a in a good position to be able to do what you're doing now?
Well, a lot of people think that to be successful in service accommodation, it's about knowing property. It's not. It's about customer service. Absolutely about customer service. So, 1994, my first job was a butcher's boy. My second day there, I ended up having to run the shop because the boss's daughter, who was 10 months old, broke her leg. So at the age of, what was I then, 14, I was running the butcher shop. Not a clue what I was doing, but he must have seen something in me that made him realise I could cope. And I did. It was a tiny little shop in the middle of nowhere, so it was busy-ish. And then off the back of that, I ended up working in catering through motorway service areas. Became a manager within a week of being there, or key holder as they call them, and then a manager. Worked in every unit, worked 16-hour days, went to university, got a degree in economics, also worked for HSBC Bank. This was all at the same time. And then I realised that banking just wasn't for me, because it's, part of my French, but there's a lot of dick swinging, and that's just not for me. So I then bought my own fish and chip shop, of all things. Was very successful at that, weirdly, because I don't like fish. But I did very well at that. I made really good money. For various personal reasons, my dad passing away and so on, I decided I didn't want to be in the building anymore. He used to work for me. So I took a bit of a career break from that, but came back to it. Ended up owning a restaurant, doing fish and chips, that was phenomenally busy. We were incredibly busy, but hard work. I owned a couple of other fish and chip shops as well. And then I bought the lease on a hotel, just a small village hotel. And it was at that point that I realised that the rooms that we had ran themselves. As long as you set everything up properly and you put procedures in place and you got good cleaning staff, the rooms sold themselves and you didn't have to do anything. Whereas the rest of the aspects of the hotel, like the food, getting up and having to do people's breakfasts, dealing with the locals who want to come in and have a drink and say the same conversation every day, you didn't need that. So I thought, right, I don't want to do this anymore. I've spent the last 25 years of my life nearly physically exhausted. So made the decision to go into service accommodation because it's an expansion of what I'd learned owning the hotel. And that brings us effectively to today. So I've taken all of that. And like I said, when people ask me, I'd like to get into service accommodation, what piece of advice would you give? The first question I ask is, what experience have you got in it? And no one has really, because there's so few of us that do this. I'll say, right, what experience have you got in hospitality? And again, most people would say, I've never done it. What experience have you got in customer service? And again, a lot of people would say, I haven't got any. I said, well, are you 100% sure you want to take on a 24/7, 365 customer service business? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is I'm not sure, well then, I don't say this anymore, but 2 years ago I would say, go and get a job working on the front desk, part-time job, like a Premier Inn or a Traveller or somewhere that's got hotels and you're dealing with the public. You can go and do night shifts or something. Just do 3 or 4 months practice. If you still want to do what we do, absolutely. But then at least you've tested the water without expending loads of your own money. So that's one option. The other option is if you've got none of this experience, but you still want to do it because you know it's a money-generating stream, then get a management company, because then you're outsourcing, like I do, the bits that I can't do because of time constraints or can't do because of experience or knowledge. I outsource it to somebody else because they'll be better at it than me. It's the same for people with service accommodation. There's no reason you can't have your own unit, but just get someone else to make the money for you. And that's where we step in.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting you say about, I know we've had this conversation before about it's a customer service role. And I think actually, until you said that sort of a few years back when we first met, I'd never really thought about where I started, and actually that had massively helped me out, because I started, I was always mowing lawns and had a little small gardening business when I was really quite young, like 14, 15. But then when I was sort of 16, 17, I went to work for a letting agent. And just having people walk in the office and talk to them and be able to hold a conversation, liaise with them and be polite is a customer service role. So
yeah, absolutely.
And then when that progressed then into sales and going out to people's properties and being polite, taking your shoes off, making sure everyone's comfortable and you're coming across in the right way, and making sure you've covered all what they want and they're happy, I think really helped in what I'm doing now. And I think it's a really important thing. So just quickly, a little bit about my journey then was, as I say, running sort of a small gardening business when I was sort of 14, 15, then moving on to estate agents, but still doing it at the same time because I I did loads of gardens for a estate agent when I was working there. If a job came up, I'd go and do it at the weekend or in the evening with my brother or some friends. And then, as I say, that progressed on to sales. And then just off the back of one of the networking events called BNI, I approached a landlord about a rent-to-rent deal. I'd seen some videos on YouTube. But the big thing was I wasn't educated at all. And again, I don't say this to people to buy my programs or buy our program. I say to people that if you're not educated on something, as with anything, it's going to take longer and you're going to make mistakes. Just simply.
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, if you had never been, like you said, in a customer-facing role or dealt with people before, it would have been a massive struggle for you to get into Shortmove.
I've got quite a good example of that. I won't mention his name, but I might play him this. There's a guy that we use within our business to help us for various bits and pieces. And he's just taken on his own property and he's got a company in to help him with the management and so on. But he was there the other day finishing off a flat that's upstairs. And he rang me and said, they've got some guests in downstairs. There's four of them. And they said, we've only got one key. And Josh, edit that bit. And then my friend said, look, we've only got one key, and walked off. I was like, well, no. What you say is, look, we only provide you with one key because they're quite expensive if you lose them, etc., etc. We can get you copies cut, but there'll be a surcharge, a refundable surcharge at the end of X, Y, or Z. It's not a problem. We can assist you with that. But so what you do is you probably put them off because you talk about surcharge, but you explain why. And 9 times out of 10, they go, oh, yeah, don't worry. But his response was to just go, no, I haven't got one, in that tone, and walk away. Wow. And then he rang me to say, I don't think I'm cut out for this, as in the customer service bit. I said, well, you don't need to be because you've got your company that's going to deal with it for you. And yeah, absolutely. And when he's dealing with his customers in his world that he understands, he's great. So a lot of it, again, is down to knowing what your skill set is.
Yeah.
But I've made loads of mistakes. Right at the beginning, we had some beautiful apartments up in the northeast. They were really hard work. There was issues with quite a few of them, but they were busy units. And for various reasons, we didn't quite get it right. I don't know whether it was we were getting the rates wrong. It just didn't work at the time. So we handed them back to the owner. Now another company has taken them on, and they're doing okay. They're not doing brilliant, but they're kind of doing okay. But at the time, I beat myself up that we'd failed, but we hadn't. It's just that we'd maximised what we could with them, and actually, as it turns out, maximised what anyone could with them because they were making more money with us than they are now. So I probably should have stuck that out, but at the time, I didn't know. And I most weeks I kick myself for not keeping those on. Yeah, a lot of them. There's lots. We've handed units back fairly regularly over the time, but it took a while for me to realise that happens increasingly less now because we vet every deal before we take it on. I'm not going to just blindly take properties on because there happens to be the right a property coming our way. It has to be the right one.
Well, because I'm sort of partially involved in Shortmove now as well, one of the best things I think you do is actually, if a property isn't going to make good money, it's not going to be good either for the landlord or for the person that's doing a rent-to-rent on the property, and it's just simply not going to work. Why have a bad property on our books? It's going to devalue our brand. Mm-hmm. It's going to waste your time in managing it and looking after it, and the person that is trying to make the money out of it, whether that be the landlord or the rent-to-renter, it's going to struggle as well.
Why would you have it? Yeah.
But what I'm saying is there's so many companies that will just take on a property to say, now we haven't got 100 properties, we've got 101 properties.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
There is, they'll remain nameless. But
you mean you'll try this time?
Yeah. I'll try. Well, hopefully the other thing will be edited out. But this company will remain nameless. They're a company that I know that would always talked about they wanted 500 units. Why? Why do you need 500?
If it's 500 good units, yeah, wicked.
Fantastic, yeah.
If it's 500 units and 100 of them are only good and the rest are rubbish.
But it's an ego thing, right?
Yeah.
And there's a very, in fact, I'd recommend anybody who gets a chance to listen to him, a guy called James Sinclair. You might have heard him already. His nickname is the Millionaire Clown. And he says that I think he's got 17 soft play centres around the UK, mostly in the southeast corner. And he said he was more profitable when he had one than when he had 10. Because you end up stretching yourself thin, you distract yourself, and the economies of scale haven't built up yet. So you'll notice that a lot of really, really good restaurateurs in particular will just stick at 1 or 2 restaurants because they can manage those and make really good money. But when they start to scale it, to go back to my thing, fish and chips, there's very few chain fish and chip companies in the UK. But you think, well, shouldn't that be easy to scale and replicate? It's just not, because it's very hard to make sure that you can provide the exact service you want at scale quickly. So that's why I would rather sit at 50 units all day long that make really good money than go to 70 units but be spread too thin. And it's an ego thing. We manage 100 units, we manage 200 units. Most of the time they don't.
It is quite satisfying to say, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and I can understand what it does. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't do it for me personally because I'm that's just not the way I'm built. But I totally get it, especially in this industry. There's a lot of sharks. Anywhere where there is the possibility of quick money, there will be people trying to exploit you.
Yeah.
You know, that's another reason we're doing this podcast, and it's another reason that you've built the program and that I was happy to get on board with it, is because I see so many people making so many easily avoidable mistakes that I've either made or witnessed other people do. And I just think, no, we need to help them not do that anymore. Now, I'm not saying we're perfect, but we've got the experience and the knowledge to point people in the right direction. But yeah, there's certainly an ego thing over the number of units that you have.
Definitely, and that was going to be my next question is, what are your thoughts on two things really, is where the industry is as a whole in service accommodation in terms of management and companies, and then also where do you think the training side of things is at the moment in the right people out there to learn from?
They're 2 very big questions, very big. So where's the industry at the minute? And specifically, the industry is as weak as it's ever been and as in strong a position as it's ever been.
Right.
So COVID has completely ruined the hospitality industry. At the minute, theoretically, only people who cannot return home for a valid reason are allowed to stay with us. So you've cut the market from, I don't know, let's say, well, from 100% to 20%. So the demand has massively diminished. But what it's meant is that people that would have stayed in hotels but now are frightened to or nervous about doing it, that have never heard of what we do before, have had to take a sideward step, come into service accommodation and gone, this is good, it's cheaper, we've got more space, it fulfills the requirements we need, we've got our own cooking facilities, like everything about it is theoretically better than the hotels they were staying in. Now, you know, you could argue that places like the Savoy, but they weren't staying in the Savoy, were they? So in terms of the industry as a whole, we're at a really, really crucial turning point in what we do.
Would you advise people to get into it now?
Yeah, I think I've never advised someone not to get into the industry. I might advise people against a particular property, or going into it with their eyes closed or without the knowledge and the experience or the guidance, because that's the mistake a lot of people make. We'll come on to the training bit in a minute, but we talked about management and so on. There's plenty of decent management companies out there. There's plenty, loads in fact. But I think we're outweighed by the number of people who are either morally bankrupt or just not knowledgeable enough yet. They've set themselves up because it's quick and easy. They're told by people online and YouTube that it's easy to set up a management company. Well, it is. It's not easy to set up a decent one, though, is it? Which brings me on to what you talk about with regards to training and so on.
Sorry, just quickly, I've seen, and I didn't actually expect it, to be honest, even coming from like some of the estate agents I worked in, we managed sort of 200 properties, and I think this is maybe one of the issues when people get into the management, is when you're managing a property on a single let and are there for 6 or 12 months, the management consists of, they come into the office, they sign the contracts, you take the deposits, you do the ID checks, check they've got a guarantor, and they go and stay in the property. If nothing goes wrong, they just move out in 6 months.
Yeah, that's not service accommodation.
No, I mean, and this is why I was actually surprised, because I come from that, and I was thinking, well, like I say, the letting agent had 200 properties, and like when we first met, and you said about having sort of 30, 40 properties, I thought, well, why can't we just get to 200? I think I actually said, well, why can't we just be the best in the UK? And I think we can, but it takes a lot more work and a lot more people to do it, because I see, like, when we go and look at a property together, your phone is just constantly ringing. You've got to do...
It's going now,
You've got to deal with guests that are checking in. You've got to deal with maintenance contractors that are going out to properties. You've got to deal with Airbnb and Booking.com. You've got to deal with cleaners. there's just so much to do.
Yeah, there's so many facets to it, and there's also, I mean, we'll come on to the training bit to finish this thing in a minute, but there's a movement in what we do now, service accommodation, to the book direct movement, because Airbnb and Booking.com are the two biggest booking platforms, certainly in the UK by volume, but they come with huge problems. They cause us huge problems. But you pay your 15%, give or take. That's generally what you pay for the booking. Now, a lot of people say you can operate without them. Yeah, you can, but this is my argument. If you're going to scale your business, you can't do it without them. They've got marketing budgets that run into the hundreds of millions, probably between the two of them. We haven't. They've got teams that their entire job is to optimize their website and so on. We do it as best we can. So why wouldn't you lean on their marketing expertise? Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't always try and get people to book directly, but if you were to expend the energy and time and money required to get lots of direct bookings in, that's a full-time job. Just that, let alone making sure the guests are happy, or like you said, maintenance or the housekeepers and so on. So you'd have to either do that yourself or recruit someone to do it. And the cost, when you're relatively small, is probably about the same as you would be paying Booking.com in commissions. That's not always the case, don't be wrong. There's two very good Facebook holiday let people, one based in Norfolk, one based in Wales. And I've spoken to both of them right at the beginning when I wanted to get into this, 3 years ago now, and they do not list on any platforms. They just have their website and Facebook and Instagram and probably TikTok, I think, now as well.
Are they not missing a massive, massive market?
No, because what they do is aimed at a certain client base, and it will be people will just go, I want to stay in a cottage in Norfolk, holiday cottages Norfolk, enter, and their listing will be near the top. Or it will say, I don't know, pet friendly holidays Wales, for example, their listings will be near the top. So why do they need to be on Booking.com and Airbnb? But they've got the time and the energy and the effort to be able to expend in that. They're targeting the market they know stays with them. Whereas what we do, which is contractor led, they're not doing the same search terms. Or if they do, they'll put, I don't know, places to stay Coventry, or short accommodation Coventry, or hotels or whatever. And Booking.com and Airbnb and Expedia Group would always be at the top. So again, why would you fight? If you know your niche and it works, then that's the route I would go. And it works for them. But for people like us and what we do, and the people that we're probably sort of talking to now, we can't compete with their marketing budget. You just can't.
Yeah.
Now, go on.
No, sorry, go on.
Well, we were talking. The other question you asked was about the training industry in the UK. In the property world, it's come under fire recently. One particular guy who I won't mention, but there's lots of Facebook groups kind of against his practices and so on.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
I mean, most people probably do. If you're immersed in what we do, you'll know who I'm talking about.
I don't really know how he's still going, or how he's actually, this might sound dramatic, how he's actually still alive.
There's a lot of hatred for the guy. Now, I'm in two minds. I know what he's tried to achieve, and he talks about wanting to make sure, get more people financially free. If that's his intention and that's his sole focus, fantastic. I admire that. But as I've seen and I've experienced with other people that I've been involved with in business, 99 times out of 100, that's clouding their real reasons. And there's a lot of people that do that. In fact, there's a lot of most property training companies in the UK either don't do it themselves or make 3 or 4 or 5 times more training people than doing it.
Yes, and off the back of that, there's two things. There is people that are buying programs, and one of my friends, that I won't say his name, but I think you know who I mean, is buying programs over the past few years and creating a social media presence, but hasn't actually done any deals himself.
Yeah,
he sells programs on everything from rent to rent, rent to SA, lease options, buy to lets, buy refurbish refinance, developments. Hasn't done a single thing.
Repackaging other people's content.
And that's it's worrying that it's allowed but people believe it. People will go onto social media, go on someone's Instagram and go, oh, well, if you've got nice cars and you've got nice holidays and you're saying you're a property educator, you must be a really good property educator. But anyone could do it because all you've done is just repackage someone else's program.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of being libelous, so don't mention his name, it's plagiarism to a degree. Now, if I'm a little bit different, it depends on the intent of the individual.
Yeah.
So, for example, I always used to lambast people that would say they're getting into property training. But then when you approached me and explained what you're wanting to do from it and why, I was still skeptical, obviously. But because your main reason for wanting to do it is because you've seen people try and fail and lose a lot of money doing this, I thought, yeah, actually, that is the true reason to teach. It's not, it's not to make money out of what we do. It's we've made the mistakes or we've learned the hard way and the easy way. So why shouldn't we help other people? Because, as an example, there are you could pay someone to source you a property for $3,000. They get it all set up for you. You're probably £7,000 or £8,000 out of pocket, but you've got an investment, and that investment you'll get the money back inside a year. Maybe 6 months into it, you decide to reinvest again, and so on. You'll grow at maybe 1 a year, then maybe 2 a year, then 4 a year, and so on. Whereas if you can teach people how to do it properly and comfortably, warts and all, for the same price as one sourcing fee, why wouldn't you? Now, I'm not to take away from sourcers, because there's definitely a need for what they do. There's people out there just without the time or the inclination to go sourcing for themselves, or the skill set, no matter how much you teach them, great. But if we can help people and hold their hand through the process, and that's what I think training should fundamentally be about. That, I mean, you look at teaching in the UK, no one gets into teaching for the money. And rightly so. They get into it because they want to impart knowledge and wisdom and guidance and experience. Yeah, exactly. I mean, part of my background, but I didn't mention it before, was when I owned my first chip shop and I was working 6 days a week, 13, 14 hours a day, a guy approached me and said, are you free on Sundays? Bear in mind, I had a young family at this point. And because I'm an idiot, I said yes. And he set up a motorbike training company. So I would do his coaching on a Sunday for him, teaching people how to ride motorbikes from scratch. Yeah. And I got paid, I got paid in a day less than I would earn in an hour on our peak days on a Friday. And I would leave home at 7:30 in the morning, get home at probably 5, 6 o'clock at night.
That's because you enjoyed it.
Because I enjoyed, yeah, exactly that, because I enjoyed it. And watching someone go from a complete novice to be legally safe on the road in a day it's the single most rewarding job I've ever had. And again, I didn't do it for the money. I did it to help the guy out because he needed someone. And he said, I only need someone for a few months. And 5 years later, I was still there. My concern with a lot of the training companies, and you as consumers potentially won't know this until you've started it, but is understand why people are teaching you and where they're coming from. Yeah. Because there are, like you said, there are a lot of people out there who teach this. The problem is, in this industry, it's a bit incestuous. It almost eats its own tail. And what I mean by that is there'll be people out there who probably started very well, made quite good money, but did okay, reached their limit, and then realised that they could earn more by training people. Now, ironically, what they're doing is teaching people how to train people to do things. So they've gone from doing the thing to teaching people how to do it to teaching people how to teach people how to do it. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And that's the new thing is, if you can't afford to set up in property yourself, or if you can't afford to get a rent to SA deal, we found a way you can do it for free. You can just teach people how to do it with zero knowledge.
Yes.
If I'm honest, and this will probably come back to bite me, it's dangerous is what it is. Hence why you and I have partnered up.
And I think it's really interesting because you made a good point there. Is actually really it's probably quite hard to do, but just look at people's reviews and what's been said about people. But find someone that actually does want you to do well, does want to help you, and isn't in it for the money. And I get questioned this a lot, and I've had it all over Instagram because people know that I've got sort of over 30 units in Coventry, and I mean I don't post a lot about my life on Instagram because it's my life. Everyone tells me off. They say I should do it because it builds your social media awareness. But
neither of us do it, do we?
I know, but I've got loads of exciting things going on in the background, but I just don't need to tell people about them.
Yeah, exactly.
But people go to me all the time. They say, So why do you sell courses if you can make so much money in rent to SA? The honest answer is two things. It helps people and it's another source of income.
Yeah, ultimately, there's always this, you've got to have multiple streams of income coming in.
So I'm involved with my rent to rents in Coventry, rent to SAs. I'm involved with Shortmove. I have a program that I am selling. So it's another stream of income.
Yeah, but this is one of the things that made me nervous when you first talked about it, right at the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't think you know this, is intent. What was your intention? And then when you explained, because how long did we sit and we talked? It was an hour and a half talking about how to take a payment.
Yeah.
Right? I think it was slightly longer than that, an hour and 40 maybe. Now, there was a lot of content in that, but it's all relevant. Whereas there are people out there that will do a 3-minute YouTube video on it. And because you were adamant that you had to give the maximum amount we possibly could, that's still at a digestible level, and then the amount you're charging, that was key. Because there are people out there, you can get a course for there's a company I know, £497 for a 1-day online coaching thing. What are you going to get out of that?
You'll get £400 worth of
value. Yeah. Whereas what you're offering, there are people out there that charge, I think, 12. In fact, I know one company that's charging between £12,000 and £20,000 for less direct contact and information than we're going to give.
Well, the thing is, when we created the program, or when we sat down together back in Leamington before Christmas, I just went with the view that every time we did something, or we spoke about something, whether it be cleaners or the booking process on Airbnb or payment, how much more detail can we go into on this without people going like, Bradley, that's just really confusing now.
Switching off.
Yeah. But they go, oh, wow, that's so much value. Right, I need to go back and watch it. What I didn't want to happen, and this is what, in my opinion, without sort of being big-headed, but the best thing about the program is the aftercare, because there's so many programs that you can buy, and it might take you a day or 2 days or 3 days to go through it, or you can go on a live event, but you're going to get home, and you're going to try and do a deal, and you're going to go, oh, wait, how does that work? You go back and watch the content, and you go, oh, it's not in there. Or you'll go and talk to an estate agent, if you're doing rent to SA, for example, and they're going to say something, and you're going to go, well, the trainer I spoke to didn't give me that objection.
Yeah, you can go back and watch a video, but the video is not as good as, I'm trying to think of a decent example. Okay, so we've given quite a lot of detail on how to deal with a thing called a chargeback, which we'll do another podcast on that. And I can explain it to you as best I can through a video, but it's the nuance of the claim. So there's about 8 different ways, I think. Is it 8? There's probably more than that. 8 different options at least for a reason for chargeback.
Yeah.
Now, if we'd have gone into that level of detail, people would just switch off. But what like you said, it's the aftercare. You can speak to me, because the very first chargeback we ever got was for £637, I think, pounds.
Not that it sticks in your head at all, and it really bothers you, and you think about it all the time.
Mad, and it was a guy from Albania, I think, was staying at a flat in Manchester, and we did all the tests and the checks that I knew about at the time. I know a lot more now, and we let him stay. He stayed. 3 weeks later, I got a phone call from a company in Canada asking who the bleep I was. Her words, and I explained to her why. She said, "Well, why have you charged our card 800 or whatever it's Canadian dollars?" I haven't. What do you guys do? Turns out they sell computer parts. Well, this guy that stayed with us in Manchester, it turns out he'd worked for a company in the UK who sold computer parts to this company in Canada, who then sold them on again to people in Canada. Yeah. And he'd kept their card details and was just, he'd left the company, he'd kept this lady's card details and was just using them to stay around the UK. And that's a perfectly valid chargeback, and we had to give them their money back. That costs me, even though we're managing for somebody else, I took that upon myself to make sure that our investor wasn't out of pocket, because they should have had that money, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So that wiped me out the first month almost, when we first, because there was procedures and stuff going in, and we put a lot of money into the business. That the first month's profit was gone on the 3 apartments in that block.
But that's just all part of the learning process, isn't it? As with anything.
But if we'd have done, if our video had been that in depth, people would switch off. But then if we'd have just gone, chargebacks are easy to deal with, you just do this, that's also wrong. But that's what a lot of training companies seem to do now, either give you zero follow-up or make it sound easier than it is. And that's, if I'm honest, that's what bugs me more than anything, making it sound, you can make £1,000 a month no, you can't.
And it's the amount of programs, and I've looked at programs. I've bought very, very few programs because, well, a few reasons is it doesn't really matter what they're doing as long as I know that I am producing and giving as much value as possible. Then I don't really care what anyone else is doing, to be honest, without sounding arrogant.
Now that's my attitude with. So when I first took on service accommodation, I didn't go onto any of the Facebook groups. Not so much out of arrogance, but more out of I knew there was going to be conflicting opinions
and views on different things.
Yeah, so I brought my experience and knowledge into it and learned the hard way, the easy way and the hard way actually, because I find it easier to learn to a degree by doing, but with having some form of support there. But yeah, the fact that you've got people out there that, where have they got their knowledge from?
Yeah, 100%.
It might be completely empty and vacuous, and for you to have listened to all of those might have actually made your program worse.
Yeah, but like one thing that, and I think so, in our program we've got sort of 20 hours worth of content where we talk through everything from finding your gold mine area, doing your research, booking.com, maintenance, management, cleans, the lot, everything in that 20 hours. But what I didn't want to do was say to people, here's this program, give me a certain amount of money, there you go. Because like I say, what happens after when they go, oh, I've got an objection with this landlord, or I don't know how to manage that properly. So what we've done is we structured it so for 3 months after that, they have bi-weekly calls.
Mm-hmm.
So they can call me up or call you up, or we can do a joint call, and they can say, well, actually, for example, I've got a charge back on this, how do I deal with it? Or they might say, actually, I'm looking at this property, it's saying that the rent is this much and the nightly rate is this much, but unfortunately the clean is going to cost so much because I can't find a good cleaner. So all them bits and bobs, people need to help get sorted. Otherwise, why sell them the 20 hours in the first place?
Well, and it's also these courses that are just all online, which some people think they can learn fantastic, or one-day courses or spectaculars or whatever, is that's not why we're doing this. That if we were to do that, we'd be hypocrites. The whole point of this, ultimately. Now, I've used this phrase quite a few times with a lot of people, and I get blank stares, so I hope it actually means what I think it does. But if the people have said to me, why do we want to help more people become independent and run their units really, really well? And well, why wouldn't I? And they say, oh, because they're competition. So I'm same with the chip shop. Someone once said to me, if a chip shop opened up next door to you, what would you do? I said, make sure I'm doing the best I can. If they're good and I'm good, it doesn't matter. In fact, there's mathematical research that shows you're better off if you own a petrol station. You're better off, location specific. This is setting up next door to one that exists, because what will happen is if you're a little bit further apart, the people in the middle struggle to choose which one to go to. But if you're right next door to each other, they'll just go to the one that's the nearest. And there's no one in the middle being split, right? So my logic is, if we can make everyone in our industry better, the industry gets better, therefore we all benefit. And the phrase I use is all boats lift on a rising tide. Mm-hmm. So theoretically, if we're all better, we'll all do better.
Yeah.
And that's my main motivation for this. I mean, it's a bit weird, but the end of this podcast has sounded a bit like a sales pitch for your program, which I suppose technically it probably is. But to reiterate, I'm very proud of what we've built. And I was looking into his eyes as I said that. Felt a bit weird.
He just stroked my foot as well, but we won't talk about it.
A little bit creepy. No, but I wouldn't have put my name to it if I didn't think it was the most valuable piece of content in our industry. To be fair, there are books and stuff out there that I quite highly value as well. But they're harder to learn from because they're not an interactive tool. But you can go out there yourselves. Anyone that's listening to this, you can do loads of research. You can. It is possible to learn everything you need to learn on YouTube. It is possible. Of course, it is. But if either you're not the kind of person that would then implement it, put it into practice, why waste the time and energy? Or if that's misleading information and you don't know, then it's dangerous and can be very expensive. And the problem is because you're trusting people on YouTube who, let's be honest, some of the stuff my daughter watches, she's 10. And I just think, like, luckily we monitor her, what she watches, but it's so vacuous and pointless, but she loves it. And as humans, we devour things that appeal to us, whether they're good or bad for us, we devour it. Same as food. That's probably why I weigh as much as I do. So if we can either help people with our program, or if there's a particular, it might be that our program doesn't exactly suit the way they learn. If we can point them in the right direction of a program or a person or a management company or a book or a YouTube channel or whatever it is that we know will help them, then reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help.
Yeah, and it's actually funny you said, because I was actually having a conversation with someone on the phone the other day, and I was actually around my girlfriend's house. I was having a chat on the phone to this person for 45 minutes, and they just wanted advice. And I got off the phone, and she goes, "Why are they buying the program? Are they talking about this? Are they coming on with Shortmove?" I said, "I don't know, they might do." She went, "Well, why are you wasting your time with that?" I said, "I've got the knowledge. I've got the spare time.
Why not?
They need the help.
Yeah,
it's a conversation."
To be fair, my wife Lisa is exactly the same. How are you going to make money out of that? I probably won't. Why are you doing it then?
But
why not?
But so they're not gonna remember me for being a horrible person or trying to take money off them. They're gonna remember me for, actually, Bradley was really helpful. Then they're gonna go, actually, let's have a quick look on Bradley's Instagram. Then they're gonna say to someone, actually, I spoke to this person, he was really helpful. And you just build up a good reputation for yourself.
It's just, yeah.
And it's like Gary Vee says about, I know everyone talks about Gary Vee, but I actually really like him. About give. And what's his book called? Something about a punch.
I'm not sure. I didn't know he had a book, actually. I like most of it. His sound bites are very good.
It's something like jab, right hook, or right hook, jab. I can't
I'm not sure.
But basically, he talks about a book. And in his book, I think the whole idea is basically you give as much as you possibly can. And the amount of free content he gives out about everything, before asking for anything. He sells books. He's got a big media company. He sells wine. He does loads of different things. But his whole, I think, point.
It is jab, right hook.
Jab, right hook. Yeah, his whole point is about giving information to be helpful, rather than I'm giving this information because I want something back off you.
He does say, he talks about that on Instagram, doesn't he? He said the way to build an Instagram presence is to go on to, I can't remember the exact ins and outs, but 5 other people that you admire or like or who are in your world, and just comment and give feedback, positive, useful feedback, and build it and they will come. And if they don't, you've done a good thing.
Yeah.
I remember, I went to a very small but very rough council primary school.
Can tell.
Thanks. But I was lucky enough, I passed my 11 plus and I went to quite a very nice school actually. I was lucky, thank God it was free. And I remember going to play games on my first day, and we used to have to walk out of town. It was about, a mile and a half, 2 mile walk out of town. And I was rushing to get back to the bus. But in my head, now, if I'm honest, I don't know whether this is the way my mum and dad brought me up, or whether it was we'd had it drilled into us in school that week that we represented the school. But there was an old dear. She wasn't. She was probably about 4, about the age I am now, 40. Looked like she needed help crossing the road. So I stopped as an 11-year-old, all 2'6" or whatever I was at the time, and offered to help her cross the road. And she turned around, bless her, laughed, and went, "I'll be fine, thank you." And she crossed over. But that memory of offering someone help, and if they needed it, great, and if it helped them, great, but for no discernible benefit to myself, has always stuck with me, always. And it's things like, again, I won't mention them, but there's a particular sourcing company based in the UK who currently have a reputation for not delivering on promises and then not giving money back when they've messed up, because the contract says, well, yes, the contract might say that, but your moral contract and your moral obligation says give them the money back. Because why wouldn't you? When we had the fish and chip shop, the restaurant in particular, we served, I think our busiest ever day, we served about 3,500, nearly 4,000 customers. Now, we actually technically had busier days than that because it was a big festival, but normal operating day, you're not going to get every single meal spot on, because you can't in that time with the kitchen we had. So my response was, if it was a genuine mistake on our part, their meal and that the person's meal that we got wrong was free, and they got a free round of drinks. And like my wife would moan, and the front of house managers would moan in the beginning and say, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Because it's worth it."
Yeah, build up an amazing reputation for you.
Yeah, and again, I can't say I'm doing it completely selflessly, because I knew that ultimately they'd come back, or if they didn't, they'd say, "We went there, they messed up, but I tell you what, the service was fantastic," and then that would lead to more and more clients. So, the reason I'm coming back to this, and it's probably quite a good way of wrapping this part up, is I think it's probably highlighted that both you and I, from different aspects, have come from customer service backgrounds.
Yeah.
And it's all about making sure the customer is ultimately happy. And that's, I never realised that this thought is forming, so bear with me. That's part of the reason the programme has been created, is to provide a service to customers that is required, but will go above and beyond to make sure it works. Yeah. Same as with, don't get me wrong, we in fact, we're in a transition process with some of your properties at the minute, where one of the teams that we use to deliver the guest experience, shall we say, is rubbish. They're not doing a particularly good job at the minute, and there's been friction, shall we say.
And so, I'm actually quite looking forward to the fact we've got the conversation after this podcast.
Yeah,
because sometimes confrontation is quite good fun.
It depends. Yeah, it depends. Again, it's all about intent, isn't it? Ultimately, and what we're doing, or the plan is to protect Bradley's business and to make sure that our guests get the best service they can, and so on. So we're having to let this cleaning company go because they're just not delivering. They've had ample opportunity and they've got to go. It's a horrible conversation to have, but ultimately it's the one that we need to do to make sure the business survives. But I've spent a lot of my time having to refund guests or offer them extra services, or put cases of beer in the fridge, whatever it takes to make sure they're happy, because that's ultimately what it takes. And the same with the program. There's the content. There's no issues with content based on what we do, but it's more, I've watched, and I do it on purpose. I watch a lot of other YouTube videos of people that, we discussed the guy earlier. I won't mention his name again. But what's driven me more so to start doing stuff like this is he's taught two people to make their apartments, I think they've got 3, look stunning. But they're in a not particularly desirable city, and 2 of them are in a not particularly desirable area of a not particularly desirable city, and they must have spent £7,000 or £8,000 on furniture.
So let me guess, they're going to make loads and loads of money. They're going to make £1,000 a month. They're going to get their money back straight away.
No. What's going to happen is, don't get me wrong, if these properties were in Cornwall or central London, or
so just somewhere nice,
or 4 years ago at peak market when what we did had its sort of boom, it's quite cyclical, because we've had the boom, we've had a semi-bust, and we're starting to see the increase back up now. But I think it's going to go higher than it was. Then they'll probably do okay, but they spent so much money and they're expecting 120, 130, 140 pound a night, but they're getting 60. And at 60, they're making losses.
And this is on a rent to rent, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but they've been taught by an industry leading expert, self-styled leading industry expert, and he's been doing it less than a year, and that's what makes me nervous.
One thing that's interesting about the whole education side of things in property is one of my best mates, he's a trader. He trades Forex.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a bad stigma around trading, and a lot
always
of programs and different things. And he's a pretty experienced trader. I mean, he's my age, he's 22, but he's been trading for 5 years. And he has the knowledge and the ability to create a program, but he won't, because of everything that's out there at the moment.
Yeah,
I think it's really odd that we've somehow got to this point where there used to be so many good educators out there, and so much good information, but now there's easy access to so many videos on YouTube and so many podcasts and so many people pretending that they are market leaders. It's just messied the water for everyone.
This is the thing. How do I put this? You mentioned it earlier, when we first started to talk, you said about the idea of Shortmove being the biggest and the best in the UK, but the way you said it was with zero arrogance, not even there was an easy confidence about why not, and the attitude. And I went home and spoke to Lisa, my wife, and she said, "Good, that's the right attitude to have, rather than tell people you already are, which a lot of people do. We're the UK's leading sourcing company. We're the UK's leading management company." Says who?
Yeah, says you.
Yeah. And does it matter? Do McDonald's say they're the UK's leading burger supplier? No, they just get on with it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And usually when businesses say we are the UK's leading or the world's best or the this, that and the other, they're probably not.
It's like the rubbish you see on Instagram as well. Like, I see, it must be because, have you ever heard of the brand Manscaped?
Oh, God, yeah.
And it just always pops on my Instagram. But then like loads of other grooming things pop up as well. And it says things like, we were voted the best grooming product in 2018 in GQ. I'm thinking, yeah, but it's 2021.
Yeah, yeah.
What,
It's like Donald Trump.
What does it matter what you did 3 years ago?
Did you hear? I mean, this might be apocryphal, but I'm pretty sure it's true. It's something along the lines of he built a new golf course in Scotland, and his team presented to him unexpectedly on the 18th hole. There was a pedestal thing for him to stand at a plinth, and they presented him with the award for Scotland's best golf course, as voted for by him and his staff, or equivalent. I mean, I don't know whether it was exactly that. Yeah, as voted for by him and his staff. And you think, well, where's the validity in that? We had it again, to come back to fish and chips. There was one industry leading award, and that was the Fish and Chip Shop of the Year award, and it was so powerful that it can change the fortune of a business. But I also knew the impact it had, so we never entered it because it's really, really hard work. And what stopped me was, I'm sure it was a comedian called Rod Gilbert, and he wrote an entire stage show called The Award-Winning Mince Pie. And he wrote this stage show because it angered him so much that it was, I think, Welcome Break or some motorway service company. Award-winning mince pie. When he read it as presented to them by their own head office or something stupid like that, and that's the thing. The best piece of advice I can give is, when you're looking at learning to do this, go in with your eyes wide open. Absolutely. Understand the nuances of what we do and how hard it actually. It can. Yeah. Well, no, it is. But as long as you're prepared, we can minimise how hard, or anyone can minimise how hard or what impact it has on you. Don't listen to absolutely everyone. Get a broad understanding, and the truth and what's good and bad will come out of it. But then also, if you're going to want to learn from someone, make sure, A, they have genuine knowledge and they do know what they're talking about, and ask them questions. You'll soon find out. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we've offered, isn't it? We'll happily show people around, good and bad, because some of our units aren't top end, but that suits the market. And then make sure that you could, ultimately, that they're people that you can work with and learn from and potentially grow with. That's for me, because that's how I operate. It's more important the relationship you have with the person. We just handed back a property in Portsmouth because the investor, her expectations, her attitude. I was getting messages at 1 o'clock in the morning, and because I wasn't responding instantly, that wasn't good enough. And yet I would reply to her and wait 3 days to get a response. So effectively, we did absolutely everything that she required, and she said to me that she wanted to make sure that she had input, and she wanted to know that she was going to be getting everything she needed out of it, and put her own personality into the property. Great. So we got the basic furniture, and her job was to then do the soft furnishings. 3 days later, another management company had helped her sort out the broadband, something she'd never mentioned to me, and therefore she was going with them, despite me saying, right, what's their experience? They managed 3 units in total, I think. What's their what have they run numbers for you in that particular city? No. Have they given you projections for what it'll do? No. What else have they done for you? Well, not a lot, but they helped me with the broadband. Okay, well that's what she absolutely fine. I mean, it kind of helped me make the decision. Please do go with them, because it wouldn't have worked.
Okay, well, in terms of then one piece of advice you might give to someone who is starting off in the rent to SA process and looking at the management side of things, what would you say people should look out for, or maybe focus on? If you were doing it and you were starting off, what would you say is the most important thing? I'd probably say, for me, I'd say it's mainly research. So research into the area, make sure the property's going to work, look at your nightly rates, what rents are you going to pay, where your clients are going to come from, and really spend a lot of time on that. Don't just use some of the figures that you've probably heard out there where people are saying, well, if you can get 20 nights and make some money, and don't hope for the best. Make sure you're actually doing a lot of research, and it is 100% going to work. So yeah, so what are your views?
Yeah, so we've been offered a £1.3 million 6-bedroom barn conversion that sits up in the hills in Stratford, 2 acres of land, tennis court, swimming pool, the works. And it would be amazing to have on the portfolio, but the numbers don't work. They will when we come out of lockdown, no doubt. So we put it on the back burner and we'll launch it maybe next year at this rate. But it would be really, really nice, and other companies would have just grabbed it to have it on their portfolio and made a complete mess of it, because even I would at the minute made nowhere near enough money. So I said to the family, just stay. You don't need to. You don't. Their plan is to go travelling at some point soon in the next couple of years. Just wait. You can't anyway because of COVID. But they were going to move into a rented accommodation. I said, no, just relax and stay where you are. But one piece of advice would be that this might put some people off, but I don't mean it to, is you've got to understand its customer service. And if you're great at that, fantastic. If you're not, find someone who is. That's it. There's no reason to be put off this industry because you've got no experience or knowledge. I mean, again, James Sinclair, look him up on YouTube, look him up on podcasts and stuff. He's very, very good. His earlier videos, if I'm honest, are even better because they give you an insight into his day. But like he says, what he's very, very good at is making balloon animals, doing kids' magic tricks, and making big business-wide decisions. What he's rubbish at is admin. He said, so why would I do it? The very first thing he did when he was 18, 19 years old, when he got his own business, was to get a lady in to do his ironing. He said, I paid her 10, 12 quid an hour, but I'm rubbish at it, and I could do more valuable things. And then once he got bigger and bigger, he wasn't particularly good at the day-to-day managing directorial stuff, so he got a managing director in. So my advice would be sure that this is an industry you want to get into and surround yourself with people that can help you achieve it. And it might not, you can't do it all yourself.